Let's actually back up to some introductions, because for the video people, they won't know who anybody is.
Oh, yeah.
So Beth, let's go to you.
Beth Johnson. I mostly learn from these guys, anything I know. So John asked me to be up here. Every year, actually, I'm up here, but I have a lot more questions than answers. But I wanted to add one thing that is also useful that I do a lot that hasn't come up, that might not be obvious, is if you have a sheet of paper that you buy at a store that's not a handmade paper made for origami and doesn't have that crispness that you want, you can also add just methylcellulose to one single sheet of paper, just the same way, to give it, John calls it sizing, was it sizing?
Yeah,
Sizing.
yeah.
And I almost always, if I don't buy it from an origami paper maker, have to add something like that to, I guess it's mostly handmade papers or more.
Right.
Yeah, it's a paper preparation technique that
Yeah.
a lot of tessellation people do all the time.
Yeah. And I'm Michael LaFosse from Origami Dough Studio, and what Beth said about adding methylcellulose to a single sheet, and there are other materials you could apply too. What you're trying to do is add some sort of reversible material, and the more solids that you can get from that reversible material into the web of the paper or between your layers, the better it's going to be. It'll be crisper, it'll be stiffer, and it'll work best. So the consistency of the methylcellulose that you apply is going to be a very important thing for you to experiment with. If it's too thin, you won't end up putting enough solids. When it's dry, it'll leave not much behind. If it's too thick, you'll have plenty of solids, but you may, in the process of brushing across your paper, rip your paper to bits, because it's a mechanical thing that will do that. So people often ask about consistency. There's no one right consistency. Be prepared to experiment if you make up your own stuff.
And I'm Richard Alexander, Origami Dough Studio, and I've been working with Michael since 1988, when he was, what, 16? So.
Right, yeah.
But I took over hand paper making after our intern left. We had a visiting artist from Japan named Satoshi Kamiya, who actually came and lived with us for 10 months, not to learn anything about origami. He already was a master, but he was using something called tissue foil, which has a couple of problems if you're going to be selling your works to museums. If a museum is going to shell out $20,000 for a piece of origami, they want to make sure it's not going to fall apart in 10 years. And sometimes the adhesives that you use to put the foil onto the paper are rubber-based, and they're going to just degrade through age. Sometimes the paper that is put onto might be treated with acid if it's like a tissue type of paper or a translucent paper. So Master Makoto Yamaguchi and Satoshi's parents sponsored him to come and live with us for 10 months. And that was in 2001 to July of 2002. Now, during that time period, I had a full-time job, but every day I would come home and say, okay, boys, what were the problems today and how can I help you solve them? And this included everything from getting different screens and building vats, and one by one, we'd build up everything we needed to make any kind of paper that Satoshi had in his mind. And when he left, I was left with all that stuff that I consider a non-performing asset, so I had to learn how to make paper. And we're probably 30,000 sheets later.
Yeah. I've been making paper since I was 16 years old, so I showed Richard how to do this stuff. He picked it up so fast, and it really freed me up to invent new origami, to do the diagramming, build exhibits, write books, actually do folding. So if you folded origami dough paper since that was made since what year did you take?
03.
Since 03 to now, Richard actually made that origami.
Yeah,
He's
I'm
quite
to
a
blame.
master now.
I'm to blame. I didn't start from scratch in the pollution control industry. I had been familiar with the paper mill processes and all of their equipment, so I knew the technical end of it fairly well. I do want to mention, just to plug one of our publications, this is the old hardcover version of a book called Japanese Paper Crafting, and if I were to subtitle that, it would be How to Make Your Fancy Favorite Papers Behave the way you need them to behave. So Michael put all of his techniques for not only backcoating, but for doing size and coloring and tie-dyeing, and I can't even list all of the different methods, but there's appliques of pulp, there's pulp painting, and putting vegetable matter in to make, you know, like things like this inside the paper. So this
and
is
how to
not,
make Western and Asian style
Right.
papers by hand.
it's one of our only books without a DVD, but we did put video backcoating lessons on the jewelry book and in the essential book. I'm quite
Yes.
sure we backcoated for a
Yes,
and
definitely.
maybe for butterflies.
No,
but-
not for the butterflies, but for the essential book.
So anyway, John?
All right, well, I'm John Tucker. I am here leading this workshop every year, and I think it's one of the more popular classes we teach at CenterFold. And my goal is to give you something tonight that you can, have this cool new piece of paper and fold with, but more importantly, teach you this technique and give you some, rudimentary beginning supplies and show you how easy this is and, open up some more possibilities for you in your origami work.
Cellulose down on the board first, for example. So just things like that where you'll see that people, and maybe there are better ways, but for me the takeaway is to just, like, people get kind of intimidated by it, just like with design. And there really is not, there's no risk. It's very easy to do, and you can just to dive in and experiment with it and see what works for you and what you like best is probably
Get your
the
hands
best.
messy.
Yeah, exactly.
Just do it.
Just do it, and then you'll see how easy it is and how you like to do it. And if there really isn't, if it works for you, there really isn't a wrong.
Right. Absolutely, and I tell people, well, I'm not the only one who says this, but mistakes are often the best teachers. People want to never fail. I feel badly for them.
Well,
You need to learn some lessons from things not working out so well.
speaking
Don't
of
be afraid.
mistakes, if you want to know how I made this, perhaps we should take this off and start from the back. And if you like the way this paper came out, I can show you how I made this. But you can pass that around. And I hadn't really touched it since I set it up at like 3:30 in the morning. Now you'll notice that where the MC went through the base sheet onto the plexi, it looks a little shiny. But if you just hit it with a wet sponge or a damp, I think I told some of the group to bring a face cloth or a washcloth, that sheen disappears. It'll sink back into the structure of the cellulose.
And
Now, MC was not applied to the surface of the board when we did that.
Right, that's right.
Now that's different, John, than you do it. Don't you normally
Yeah,
apply MC?
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
talk about some of those techniques for a few minutes before people
Okay.
get started.
Yeah, so the way I backcoat or surface size paper is I use sheets of plexiglass. I have them sitting over here, and I'll cut my paper to size, and I put a really thin layer of methylcellulose down on the surface first, because I find sometimes when I'm letting things dry, it doesn't properly stick to the board if you're just relying on methylcellulose soaking through the paper, and it comes unstuck, maybe starting at a corner, and then it'll warp when it doesn't have that flat, backing as it's drying. And the other thing that I do is I spray the paper with water before doing this, because when the paper gets wet, the fibers will engorge with water and they'll warp, they'll expand. And if you put the paper down dry onto a hard surface and then coat it with methylcellulose, it'll soak that glue up, it'll expand and start sticking down at the same time, and it'll just wrinkle up. And
What John said is the one thing that I'm sure everybody on all the panels agree on, and that is you must hydrate the papers before you try to backcoat. Because Michael
I
was...
think Robert disagrees with that.
Yeah, but he can, because he uses such thin paper that the
paste
it happens so quickly that it's not of a consequence. But most of us are going to use papers slightly thicker, and those are thirstier papers. You've got to dope them with water first. That's not really the right word, dope, but you got to give them a drink of water first so they can have time to expand before you start brushing stuff out on the thicker stuff.
John, where do you buy your methylcellulose and how do you prepare it?
So this is my methylcellulose that I have left. I got 2 pounds like a few years ago, and I
Is that from
used it.
Twin Rocker?
This is from Talus.
Oh,
in
Talus,
New York
yes,
City.
sure, yeah.
It's a paper and bookbinding shop in New York City, and they sell 1 pound bags of methylcellulose powder, which lasts a really long time.
And how many grams of that would be in a jar?
So I made these up in like I have like a 6-cup container. So it was 6 cups of water, which I think is about like 400 grams. Oh, wait, no, that's not right.
It's probably about a tablespoon
I
in
remember.
each of those jars.
Well, yeah.
Get a guess.
I tried
It's
to
not
measure it
much.
out while I was making this. For the 6-cup
Not
jug, I
methylcellulose.
used 25 grams of methylcellulose powder, which is maybe like 2/3 of a cup or something, or
Less than
maybe
that.
not even that much, maybe half a cup. Or something.
How many of you have mixed up methylcellulose powder? Just a show of hands. So less than a third. Did you want to talk about making that?
You're gonna be shocked.
He's a chef.
So, I'll take a stainless steel bowl, I'll just take any cup size container, I'll scoop into our big supply of methylcellulose powder, I'll throw it in the bottom of the bowl, and then I'll boil some water, maybe about 2 cups. Now I'll pour that in. The boiling water helps to quickly wet and dissolve with the methylcellulose. So I use a whisk. I got maybe 2 to 3, maybe even 4 times as much water. I don't even measure. I just say I need a lot of hot water in there, but not too much. I've got a lot of experience, so I do that until it's dissolved. I put it in the sink and I turn the cold water tap running into it, stirring all the while. Now that cold water cools it down and it goes from this real loose, watery slurry into this gel that gradually, the cooler it gets, it goes from opaque to clear. Now it's loaded with bubbles. I always do this the day before, because that then overnight lets the bubbles rise up out, so that when you grab some methylcellulose, you're not taking along with it a bunch of entrapped air. So I do it the day before, and I just wing it. And I know what texture I'm after, and it's always best to mix it up on the thicker side for your stock batch, because then you can take a portion out and then thin it with cold water to the consistency that you desire for the application.
That's
And
what I did.
yeah, that's really the best way to just do. Now, while that sample that Richard pulled off the board is going around, what I wanted to mention is you should compare it to your single sheet of origami dough paper. You can feel the quality of this single sheet of origami dough, and then when that back-coated sheet of two layers of origami dough with methylcellulose comes around, you will really feel the folding quality difference. That piece of origami dough paper that's going around that's back-coated 2 sheets together with methylcellulose, that's as tough as a dollar bill. So,
I do have to say though that the half sheets that I've given everybody,
yeah.
these tend to be fairly thin. And the reason I did that is that I know a lot of people are traveling, and the thinner the top sheet, the faster everything will dry. Now it does present another little bit of a problem, and that is that the, is this unroyer?
Yeah.
This is quite thick by comparison, and the 2 thicknesses might fight and it might roll a little bit. You'll get like a little puckering just because of the fact this will dry much more quickly, but I think you'll be able to work with it just fine if you put it between a couple pieces of cardboard with a book on it, let it equilibrate.